yeah, and our Member Perks program will save you thousands on shopping, dining, products, and services across the country. Join us at legion.ca.
This program is brought to you by Rogers Xfinity, connecting you to more of what you love. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
And welcome to HealthLink, a program connecting home, community, and healthcare. My name is Carol Merton, and today I'm delighted to welcome as a guest Svet Milanopolus, who is a public health inspector at Grey Bruce Public Health. The topic we're going to discuss today is animal exposure, rabies, and being safe around wildlife. Svet, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Carol. Thanks for having me again. It's always a pleasure when I come on.
Thank you. And we were chatting just before the show about the questions that you sent, and I'm going to be most interested in your responses to them. And there's a few that really captured my interest for sure. So I'm wondering if we could, do a bit of a preamble, and you'd sent some information about it being an eventful summer locally and provincially. Can you fill us in a little bit more about what you mean by that?
It has been an eventful season as far as the rabies program goes. Heartfelt condolences. There has been one human death, a small child in Brantford. So condolences and prayers go out to the family of that case. Rabies is a fatal disease.
Yeah, and I am going to say heartfelt condolences from all of us here on Rogers TV as well. So thank you for bringing that forward, Svet.
Absolutely. So that in itself highlights the importance of the program, rabies program. In Canada, a little bit of a historical background. In Canada, there has been 28 deaths as a result of rabies. Our last death was from 1967. That was also attributed to a bat exposure. Most of the cases that we have had have resulted in from bats in human cases, but that's not to say that's the only vector of a rabies virus. We also have fox strain. There's a raccoon strain of rabies, skunk, and the bat. It's not only does the death highlight the busy season. In Grey Bruce, we have had 3 positive bats, no human cases, but positive bats that have resulted. So we know that the rabies virus is in the bat population. So this year, 3 from Grey Bruce. Traditionally, about 10%, 10 to 18% of all Ontario submissions from the bats come back positive. So it's important to acknowledge that and to be wary of wildlife encounters and bat encounters with rabies. But that's not the only. Public health also follows up dogs, cats. So we have investigated almost 600 cases of animal bites. And we follow them up just to make sure that the risk of rabies is not possible. And out of those 592 cases, 21 of biting incidences resulted from a wildlife or a bat. 2/3 of them are predominantly from dog bites, and then a little bit over 100, close to 200 are from cat bites or scratches.
Wow.
So that's essentially what we mean by a busy summer. busy year. Not only do we follow up domestic animals, but there's also wildlife exposure to the rabies virus onto humans.
You use the term vector, and I'm wondering if you could just explain that term a little bit more before we get into the more specific questions.
So the rabies virus can impact any warm-blooded mammal. But it's traditionally there's a few species of animals that are known to be carriers in Ontario.
Yeah.
Originally, it was the fox strain that came, but we haven't, because of MNR, Ministry of Natural Resources, when they do the baiting, because we acknowledged that there was a problem with fox strains. And for 30 years, we were, Ministry of Natural Resources were dropping baits from planes, and 30 years of dropping baits, we haven't seen a fox strain or rabies virus because of 30 years that we've been dropping the baits. So it takes a long time. And the fox strain can go into a bovine. So we have cattle that have been positive of rabies, and they encounter the rabies virus through an interaction of either a fox, a skunk, or a raccoon. That's where our strains are. So the vector is potentially could be any warm-blooded mammal can carry the virus. But humans become at risk when we come in contact with the saliva of an infected animal.
Okay.
So that's the transmission. That's how it happens, and it's usually through a wild animal that happens. So those are the vectors, wildlife. Those are the vectors, and we inherit the virus through the contact of the saliva. Humans are at risk.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say that's helpful to know so that it is through the saliva of an infected animal that it is transmitted.
Yes, ma'am. So we have to traditionally we either a bite. It can be in the form of a scratch as well, because a lot of these animals groom themselves, so we can come into in contact with their saliva from a scratch. So we'll follow it up that way. But there's also mucous membrane transmission. So if I come in contact with the saliva of the animal, let's say for example, there's a dog got hit in the car by a car, and all of a sudden we're trying to help the dog, and in the process we lift them and we come in contact with the saliva of that dog. If we have cuts in our open hands,
Yeah.
then the saliva of the animal, it doesn't always have to be a bite. It's the saliva of the animal can come in through an open wound in our hand, or we come in contact with the saliva and then we rub our eyes. So the mucous membrane, so the saliva, we introduce it into the mucous membrane, into an open wound or a bite or a scratch. And then the saliva of that animal enters our muscle tissue, and then it migrates into our nervous system. And then once it reaches the brain and the nervous system, the virus, it is fatal. Absolutely. So the importance with the treatment is the vaccination. So when we come in contact with wildlife, either a bite, a scratch, or the mucous membrane, it's important to go to seek treatment, and that way, the way to save, provide the treatment is to get vaccinated. So the vaccine saves you, absolutely.
There were 3 bats from Grey Bruce that tested positive. Can you share a bit more information about those bats, please?
Two bats were through human contact. So it was either the individual experienced the bat bite, or the bat made contact with them.
Yeah.
So when there is a bat situation, it is deemed to be exposure to the bat. Even if you come in contact with the bat, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bite.
Okay.
The reason the bats are become a little bit trickier than other wildlife is because their teeth are so fine, and sometimes we won't feel them.
Okay.
In this situation. So now we're just gonna speak about bats for a little bit for a little period.
Yeah.
And so if an individual encounters a bat in their room and they're sleeping, and that individual, if they're a heavy sleeper or they're cognitively impaired, they might not notice the bat bite or the scratch because their teeth are so fine, we won't see the wound. If for example, a small child that can't speak, can't recollect, but you have observed the bat on the bed when you wake up, that may constitute as exposure. We would go to err on the side of caution and do it that way if the individual can't remember. If an individual encounters the bat outside and it's a bright day and everybody's aware, you're not sleeping, you have full cognitive ability. If you don't come in contact with the bat, there's absolutely no risk. But
Okay.
if you come in contact with it, or if you're in a cognitive impaired state, or a small child that can't communicate, can't recollect, it's always good to call public health, and then we can go through a risk assessment to see if the rabies vaccine would be recommended. Yes, ma'am.
So I want to take you back to the room, the bat in the room. First of all, if someone sees a bat, then assume that you need to proceed. Don't wonder and wait. You're saying check it out if you happen to see a bat in the room.
If you happen to see a bat in the room and it happened overnight, absolutely we can. If you can come in contact and the individual has possession of the bat, we can test it.
Okay.
We can test it, and it goes to a lab by Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and then if we test it and it's positive, we will vaccinate. If, for example, the bat escapes,
Yes.
we don't have possession of the bat, and you observed it overnight, and you're not sure if it came in contact with you, but you saw it in the drapes,
Yeah.
and we don't have possession of the bat, we can't test it, I would still recommend to go to your physician and discuss the need for the rabies vaccine. Then the doctor orders it through the health unit, and then we deliver it to the healthcare practitioner.
Okay. So you can't really, you don't want to wait to test a human about whether they might have it. It's you give the vaccine if there's a possibility that, and you don't have the ability to test with the bat itself.
That's correct. If it's overnight. But then there's situations where, for example, I come out of the front door of my house, and I see the bat, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and I see a bat hanging on a tree.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a risk.
Okay.
That wouldn't be a risk because you know that if you were in contact with it.
Yeah.
It's only if you're not certain if there was a contact, assume that there was. Err on the side of caution and go see. But if you know it's in the daylight and you see it outside, or it flies when you're walking at night, and sometimes if there's trees in the you might see a swooping bat at 10 o'clock at night. If it doesn't come in contact with you, there is absolutely no risk. But if you're not sure, absolutely.
So I'm going to Yeah, no, that's good. Always seek help and advice from public health, and also the healthcare practitioner would be the best advice, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to take you again back to the room or the home. And one of the questions that you sent was, what if someone finds a bat in their home? What should they do? Now, I do have to tell you, I know what I would do, and I'm sure it's not the right thing, because my immediate reaction would be panic, fear, maybe a loud scream, and run to your house, Svet, and have you help me get rid of it. But all kidding aside, what should someone do if they find a bat in their home?
If they find a bat in the home, please contact public health.
Okay.
And if public health at 519, we can be contacted in multiple ways: email, through the phone, and we will always do a risk assessment to see if we have the bat for testing. We will do that, and then if we're uncertain of the possible exposure, we will advise you to go see the family physician. And then that's what ought to happen. Don't ignore it. Don't say that, oh, it's probably nothing. This is a reminder that it can possibly, just because it's in our area though. So there's a link. Just for example, in 2017, in Grey Bruce, there was 4 bats that tested positive. The fact that we have a positive bat doesn't always mean that there's a human case. It's rare that it goes into a human case, but just because it's rare, just because we haven't seen a death previously from 1967, it doesn't mean that it should be ignored. And this is why not only the wildlife component, but this is why we vaccinate our dogs and pets and cats.
Okay.
Remember how I told you a story about the foxes, and Ministry of Natural Resources were dropping baits, and the vaccine was being inoculated that way in our wildlife. We have eradicated it from our domestic animals from cats and dog population because of our vaccine. But it's not dropped by plane in this fashion. We take our pets. So vaccinate your pets. And then if you're exposed to a bite, mucus, or a scratch from a wildlife, always seek the consultation from public health, and then we would direct you. If we can't follow it up with a confinement period, isolation, or testing, we will tell you to go and see the family physician.
So how do I get the bat? If the bat is in the home, is there a safe way either to have it tested, or if there's been no contact, it's not overnight, it just happened to come into the home during day, hasn't connected with anyone, how would you recommend the bat leaves and I stay?
Right. Animal control, pest control, they're experts in removing and having recommendations on how to seal your home so it doesn't happen. But in order for the testing to take place, the specimen has to be deceased, so the bat has to be dead, and then we can submit it. If there is no human exposure associated with the bat, the testing can take it takes longer. If we know that there's possible exposure to the bat, the testing takes within 2-3 days. We will have the results.
So you mentioned a bit about the signs and symptoms of rabies, but can you elaborate a little bit on, is there a time from the exposure to an infected animal, like it could be a mammal, it could be, and then does the vaccine work at different, you mentioned once it got into the nervous system, it's pretty much fatal. But can you give us a timeline and what symptoms or signs do people look for?
So there's an incubation period, is what we call it.
Okay.
That's from the time that you were exposed
Yeah.
to the virus through a bite, or a scratch or the mucous membrane. Usually, it takes about a month to 3 months for a human to start showing symptoms from the time of the virus entering. So the incubation period, it could happen quicker than a month, because if the bite is closer to the neck or the brain, the virus has to travel very short. So if the bite happens or the exposure to the extremities, there's a lot of time. So the vaccine needs to be initiated as soon as possible, but the incubation period for it could be up to it could be up to 8 months. There's evidences, absolutely, and it could be as short as a couple of days if the bite is really close to the neck. But usually it's 1 to 3 months, and so the animal is only infectious 10 days prior to the symptoms showing up. So that's why when so although you have a long incubation period, the animal is only infectious for 10 days prior to the death. So that's why when we get an animal bite from a dog or a cat, and by the way, in Niagara, there was one cat positive last year. And in 2021, there was one dog positive in Ontario. In 2022, there was another dog. So it's not only in bats, but the cat in Niagara was most likely acquired the virus through the bat. So
Okay.
remember how the fox can transmit. So and the dogs that were positive in Ontario one came from Iran, one came from Iraq. So it wasn't domestically acquired, but the cat was domestically acquired. So you're only infectious 10 days from the time that the symptoms set.
Okay.
And the animal dies. So don't be worried about just because it has a long incubation period. If the doctor reports an animal bite happens in a human, I follow it up with a 10-day confinement. And if that animal survives a 10-day period, that is an indication that 100% you have no risk of rabies transmission. But if the animal was rabid at the time, it will die within 10 days, or it becomes sick within 5. And the symptoms, there's two types. There's a dumb rabies and a furious rabies. And in the dumb rabies, the animal will show isolation. It will show fear, especially to the human, the owner. It'll become afraid of water. It'll stop eating. And muscle paralysis. Their hind legs and their jaw muscle, they'll have no control. So those are symptoms in an animal. And then the furious rabies, as opposed to the dumb, the furious, instead of shying away, the furious becomes aggressive.
Oh, really?
They start hallucinating, and they'll attack the legs of a table, something stationary. They'll start gnawing on their limbs. So it's the opposite of the symptoms, and that's when we know that there's a problem, and then we will follow up with the human.
Yeah.
Most of the animal bites that we haven't seen any issues.
So confinement means you're at home. If public health puts someone in confinement, you're at home. Family members have to also be isolated away from that individual?
The human, no, I'm talking only about animal cases here.
Okay. So it's not the human who's confined. It's the animal
It's
confined.
that's right.
I
Be-
needed to be sure who is being confined.
yeah, it's the animal. If you
Okay.
experience right, we don't confine the human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, the risk is through the saliva of the animal.
Gotcha.
Um,
And you need
the
to know. Yeah. So is it just a one needle type of vaccination that an individual has if they require treatment?
It's a series of 4 shots
Yeah.
and 4 vaccines and immunoglobulin. The
Oh,
immunoglobulin is speeds up the reaction of the vaccine, and it definitely. So there's a two component, and the vaccine is administered on day. There's a 4 day series. It's not just one. So day 0, day 3, day 7, and day 14. That's when the vaccines would be inoculated to prevent the transmission of the disease.
this disease is a nasty disease. It's from what you're describing, and tell me some more about how the health unit is actually, or public health, because your name has changed, Graeber's Public Health. Um, how you're, I mean, obviously being on the program is certainly I'm learning lots and you're informing the public. How else do you let people know about rabies and how to protect themselves from the virus? How do you do that?
We follow up all animal bites that are reported. So if you go to a hospital and you the doctor, the nurse finds out the wounds are from an animal, they
Yeah.
report it, and I follow the investigation. If we have possession of the animal, we do a 10-day isolation period. If the animal survives a 10-day, then there's no risk for rabies. If the animal passes away or starts acting strangely, then we vaccinate. So we investigate all animal. We do awareness campaigns. Such as this, and then we go into schools and we do various social media. We inform individuals when there is a positive animal.
Yeah.
We also, though, we seek sometimes we do media releases when we can't find, for example, if the animal was at a dog park
Yeah.
and all of a sudden we don't know the owner of the animal, then we will ask the public's assistance to identify, so we can follow it up. So it's a multifaceted way, but it's not just public health trying to prevent transmission. Canadian Food Inspection Agency, but for public health, absolutely, we follow animal bites. We make sure that we reduce people's exposure to wildlife by don't touch the animal. If you are going to help the animal, please wear gloves so that we're not exposed to the mucous membrane and we don't incur any risk of transmission.
That's
So it's a multifaceted approach.
It is. All of us together help everyone stay safe. I can't believe our time is up. It's always wonderful to speak to you. You have so much information. Thank you for being on the program and providing this information for sure about rabies and how people can protect themselves. And please come back again and fill in additional information for us. Thank you as well to our viewing audience for joining us today to learn more about programs, resources, and services that are available to you and to your family. Take care and stay safe.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Hi, I'm Carol Merton, host of HealthLink on Rogers TV. HealthLink connects home, community, and healthcare with interesting topics and speakers about your health and your community.
In para hockey, the ice tilts in favor of men. But that will never stop us.
United by passion, battling for equity. We are the National Women's Para Hockey Team of Canada.
We're here.
We're hungry.
We're ready.
Ready to inspire.
Ready to leave our legacy.
Ready to be supported and make history. It's our time. Are you ready?